Hello, everybody. This is Professor Alexander, and today we're going to be covering Lecture 2, The History of Sexology. First person I would like to start off with is Richard von Krafft-Ebing, and he is most famous for creating and writing the book Psychopathology. His birthday was from 1840 to 1902. The book was published in 1886. And Richard von Krafft-Ebing was a German dude. He was German. The book covered everything from lust to impotence to paraphilia. He invented the word sadomasochism, which later would be part of the acronym of BDSM. He is also one of the first people to talk about masturbation as a root cause of sexual sin. And this brought to the public eye a wide array of different sexual variation, different attitudes, beliefs. Richard von Krafft-Ebing was German. Reverend Sylvester Graham. Now, many of us know Sylvester Graham from the Graham cracker. And Reverend Sylvester Graham was Presbyterian. He also was vegetarian. He was considered back then a health nut. So his whole thing, his whole premise and his whole ideology centered around healthy eating. We thought then that crackers prevented sexual sin. And since graham crackers were bland in nature, they would eat them to curb sexual appetite. When we think about graham crackers, right? Many of us have eaten s'mores, have done s'mores when we're camping. And they were invented to curb sexual appetite. People believe that bland foods made one less interested. I mean, now we know through science, through our history, that this is false. But many believed then that blandness at least makes people less interesting. We also called these people vanilla. So I thought this was a funny illustration of that. That leads me to John Harvey Kellogg. John Harvey Kellogg had 17 kids. He was a medical doctor, very intelligent guy, right? He established government agencies, clinics, hospitals, and he also believed, along with Mr. Graham, that eating bland foods such as cornflakes would be part of a healthy regimen, but also could prevent masturbation. His belief was bland foods such as these would decrease or prevent excitement during arousal. Okay, so whether you believe this or not, this is something that they believed in the 1800s. Now, this reads that John Harvey Kellogg, the medical doctor, and Sylvester Graham crackers were developed for the purpose of preventing carnal lust. Now, carnal lust was considered when a male's penis get hard. They almost felt like it was animalistic when this happened. Extinguishing sexual desire, curbing masturbation desires. Educators Janice and Janice reported that over 500,000 folks masturbated as a natural part of life. They also looked at how Jews had the death penalty for masturbation. Catholics considered eternal damnation, it would lead to eternal damnation. Protestants believed in hell on earth, all for pleasing oneself. Dr. Samuel Toussaint claimed that the loss of too much semen will cause debility, disease, and death. Freud said it was an immature form of sexual expression. Now, Havelock Ellis was from England. He was an English guy, and he wrote the studies of psychology of sex. He did countless case studies, somewhere in the hundreds, wrote letters. He looked at letters, biographies, and he was one of the first people that said that masturbation is not abnormal. He said this was a very common. He said most people did this, and it doesn't lead to going blind. It doesn't lead to eternal damnation or any of those things that we thought. He also is one of the first people that said people were born gay and did not become this way. And Havelock Ellis lived from 1859 to 1939, right? So this is back in the day. This leads us to a very famous human sexuality research, Alfred Kinsey. They did a movie on Alfred Kinsey called Kinsey. And he started off as an animal biologist, originally for gall wasp. This later led him to want to study human beings and sexual variation, in which he studied thousands of people, right? And he wrote Sexual Behavior in the Human. That was one of his early publications for male and female. He wanted to look at the difference between public things that we kind of said in public, public displays of affection, things that we were kind of comfortable expressing versus what was happening behind closed doors, actual sexual behavior. Kinsey report came under fire. It was highly controversial, right? Because these things were never talked about. We never talked about masturbation. We never talked about BDSM before Kinsey and the Richard von Kraft Ebings and the Havelocks. He came up with the term variation and continuum. So I will show an illustration of this. The Kinsey scale says that if you are a hard 0, right, that means you are completely heterosexual. And a 5 would be that you are completely homosexual. But he said that everybody falls within this continuum. The middle would be a variation from being predominantly homosexual, not really having that many heterosexual traits. The 2s and the 3s are kind of in the middle, where the 1s are predominantly heterosexual with only incidental homosexual play. Now, Kinsey scale became under fire because a lot of people said, well, this isn't accurate. I'm completely this. I'm completely black. I'm completely white. I'm completely on one end of the spectrum. I'm completely on this end of the spectrum. So this was debatable for a long time. But we still teach this, and we still view these folks that I'm mentioning as kind of the forefathers of the field of human sexuality. Now we are going to watch a brief bio, if it is available. So I will be uploading a brief bio to Canvas. Now, Sigmund Freud. Okay, Sigmund Freud was from Austria. Okay, and he believed, and he lived between 1856 and 1939. He believed that every individual has repressed thoughts that stem from our childhood. Most of his work had to do with our feelings from when we were kids that were either manifested or lay latent in us. So repressed thoughts. He also developed psychoanalysis, what we now refer to as therapy. So he was the forefather of psychoanalysis, where a person is psychoanalyzing you, trying to figure out whether or not you have issues, working with you around trauma, depression, social disorders. He's the forefather of that. Some of his other things that became under fire are some of the sexuality that's connected to a child. He invented the term Oedipal complex as well as electric complex. Now, Oedipal complex is the desire or a young boy being attracted to his mother and viewing his father as competition. The Electra complex has to do with a young girl being attracted to her father and viewing her mother as competition Freud also believed that young girls, all the way up to young womanhood, have what's called penis envy, and boys suffer from castration anxiety, the loss or the removal of the penis. Now, Freud developed what's called psychosexual stages of development. Now, he said from an early age, young boys they experience sexuality through their mouth. So if you've raised children, or you've been a big brother, big sister, uncle or aunt, or you have kids of your own, now from birth all the way on up to 1.5, maybe even 2, that babies put everything in their mouth. Anything that they find on the carpet or the floor, they pick it up and put it in their mouth, because this is how they are expressing themselves. They think that everything that they come encounter with is supposed to go in their mouth. We call this the oral stage. Okay. A little bit later, young children they experience the anal stage through using the bathroom, defecation. Everything is connected. Everything is centered around them pooping, essentially. The phallic stage, this has to do with the anatomical differences starting to change. The phallic stage is connected to puberty, where in a male, our shoulders will start to broaden. We'll start to develop chest hair and facial hair. Our voice deepens. In a woman, she would start to develop breasts and hips, and you would start to see these individuals, both boys and girls, start to go into womanhood and manhood in terms of anatomical differences that weren't visible before they went into puberty. Latency stage is when we have gone through all of the other prior stages. Oral, anal, phallic, puberty is happening. This is when sexual desire starts to peak. In the genital stage, this is the last stage, and this is when folks develop a sexual desire, that you are long gone with puberty, and you start to go into adulthood. You have a better understanding of your body. You have a better understanding of the things that are supposed to be happening to your body, and sexual desire is increased. Now, this brings us to William Masters and Virginia Johnson. Masters also was a TV show on HBO. And these were researchers. Virginia Johnson started off as the secretary for William Masters, and they later started dating. And they made it a conscious effort to start doing some research, and they want to prove the difference between clitoral orgasm as well as vaginal. They observed over 10,000 sexual scenes between male and female, and they wrote about it and they documented it, and they wanted to share their information with the world. They also became under fire because everything that they were publishing and putting out into the atmosphere was highly controversial. Before the sexual revolution of the 1960s, we just didn't talk about this. These things were considered taboo. So hopefully this video will play. This is the story of Master and Johnson.
When TV was black and white, and attitudes towards sex were too, their book, Human Sexual Response, detonated rather than just appeared.
Masters and Johnson's work was sprung on the world in April of 1966 to a great deal of shock.
Dr. Robert Kolodny worked with Masters and Johnson for 30 years.
The fact that a physician and his research assistant at that time had been doing laboratory studies of people actually having sex was eye-opening.
They seem so tame, Dr. Bill Masters and Virginia Johnson, deliberately cooling down a hot topic.
If one is looking for pornography, it's going to have a long look.
There's nothing of a very exciting nature in this book.
Oh, but there was. And to their own story as well.
Masters and Johnson dealt with virtually every aspect of human sexuality.
Thomas Mayer wrote a biography of Masters and Johnson.
Instead of the male being the more powerful of the sexes, what they were clinically showing was that women actually had a greater capacity for sex. They found out that older people can enjoy sex.
Mayer's book inspired the Showtime drama Masters of Sex, which shows in pretty steamy detail how exactly gynecologist Masters began his research in 1954, observing prostitutes. Their studies were conducted in absolute secrecy at Washington University in St. Louis.
If I can make the camera small enough, it'll allow the viewer to actually witness it in real time.
To discover what happened to a woman during sex. Soon after he hired Johnson, a divorced mother of two without a college degree, Masters pressured her to have sex with him.
Two of us should undertake the research ourselves.
As part of their work.
She said that she really didn't want to have sex with him, but she didn't want to lose this job.
In today's terms, that would be...
Yes, definitely would be considered sexual harassment.
But in 1970, Masters divorced his wife of 29 years and almost immediately married Johnson. By then, their names had long been linked professionally. Masters and Johnson, like Procter & Gamble, a brand. So you would argue that Virginia Johnson deserved the equal billing she got in Masters and Johnson, even though she didn't have a college degree.
Absolutely. Her signal contribution, to my mind, is that she played a very key role in designing the approach to sex therapy that they took.
Then the prevailing success rate for treating sexual problems may be 15%. They reported an astonishing 80%. The best part, the treatment only took 2 weeks.
They taught couples how to touch one another again, literally how to communicate physically, where it had broken down.
Playboy's Hugh Hefner helped bankroll their work. As the national dialogue about sex became more candid, they informed the conversation.
You have just done what Masters and Johnson would call a premature ovation.
The laughter was good-natured until the publication of their book on homosexuality in 1979.
I assume you consider the key finding, which some people are surprised at and some people seemingly are disagreeing with already, that you can convert people who want to be converted from homosexuality to heterosexuality.
Actually, this is true.
Masters was ridiculed, his conversion results questioned. Do you, in your heart of hearts, believe that at some level, Dr. Bill Masters exaggerated, fabricated?
Oh, at the least exaggerated.
And then came the bombshell. The couple who taught other couples about sex was getting a divorce. In 1992, after 21 years of marriage, Masters left Johnson for another woman.
Regardless of the tragic way their love story ends, fundamentally, their story is about bringing medicine and science into discussion of sexuality.
Masters died in 2001, Johnson in 2013. Their once famous names practically forgotten. These are the names we know now.
Premarin vaginal cream treats vaginal changes due to menopause.
Ask your doctor about Viagra.
Very informative video. Very informative video about the history of Masters and Johnson. So that, folks, that is it for today. I'm going to be uploading questions that have to do with our lecture that we just heard. This is Professor Alexander signing off.